Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we've got another video talking about the RPV drones that were on board Iowa-class battleships. The quick refresher, in case you haven't caught one of our many videos on this in the past, is that in the late 1980s, starting around 1986 as a test, and probably around 88 or 89 as a somewhat permanent feature, Iowa-class battleships had remotely piloted vehicles, RPVs, today known as UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles. And some of the Iowa-class battleships deployed with these detachments on board. We know Missouri and Wisconsin had them. They very famously used them during the first Gulf War. We know Iowa had them. She very famously was the test ship. And there's a tremendous amount of footage of these three ships operating drones. Missouri and Wisconsin in combat during the Gulf War, and Iowa during tests in 1986. However, it's really interesting that there is very little publicly available photography of New Jersey in the mid to late 80s and 90s. New Jersey is the first one reactivated in 1982, and there's a tremendous amount of photography of her in 1982, 1983, 1984, but then it just falls off a ledge. As Iowa and then Missouri and Wisconsin are reactivated, New Jersey stops being as special, and those ships get a lot of photography of them, and New Jersey stops getting photography. It's really weird. And by 1989, 1990, when New Jersey would have been deployed to the Persian Gulf and when she would have potentially carried RPV drones, we have very little pictures of her, very little pictures of any of the drone modifications. So we're falling back on archaeological evidence to say whether or not these ships had drones for much of my time here as a curator. One piece of evidence is the tub over here where the fuel bladder for these drones was installed. There's a cutout in the back of this former gun tub which had previously been used for trash disposal, and they put a special cart in here where you could pull a lever and it would drop a bag of aviation gasoline specifically for the drones. The drones don't use the same kind of gas as the helicopters or the same kind of fuel as the ship, so they had a special fuel cell on board just for drone operations. So New Jersey gets a permanent modification for those fuel hoses. Another smoking gun about drone operations on board is New Jersey does get some of the control antenna equipment. There is a space on board called the GCS station, that's the ground control station, but that room is completely gutted. There's no equipment in there, which it could have been installed and then none of the equipment was actually put in because we never had a drone. The things that you think about when this isn't the case. There's also the control antennas themselves. We've got one on the aft stack, which we recently got in place as a donation, but we never got the forward control station that you can see on other Iowa-class battleships. Look at the forward superstructure of Missouri, for example. We also have a mounting point on the old film projection booth aft of turret 3, where another drone control antenna would have been. So we've got some of these permanent features, but very little evidence of the temporary features. But we finally have our smoking gun of drones on board. So the 1990 cruise book has a page in it for the drone detachment that shows some pictures and the folks who are assigned to the ship with that. Just because we've got the attachment on board, one could argue doesn't necessarily mean that we carried drones. It is interesting that 14 of the 24 members of the drone detachment go on to transfer from New Jersey to Missouri in 1991 for her Persian Gulf deployment. So they're on board New Jersey in 89-90 for our Persian Gulf deployment, and then they transfer over to Missouri and they're on board her for the Gulf War. So that's interesting. Here's some pictures of our 90 cruise book and their 91 cruise book, and you can see a lot of familiar faces and familiar mustaches. God, the 80s were a wild time. So now we're starting to build up a little bit of a case that there were drones on board despite a lack of photography. We've got the people to man them on board, we've got the control station, we've got the antennas, we got the fuel, but all the other ships have pictures of actual drones on board, and we're still missing that final piece, or we were until Paul Stillwell published his new Battleship New Jersey Complete History book. This came out last week, August 5th, 2025. So it's available now through Naval Institute Press if you're a member there. It's available on Amazon, and we're going to have it in our store here. In fact, we've got some autographed copies, or at least we do as of filming it. We've got some autographed copies for sale if you'd be interested in that. And if we switch back to page 261, which is one of the new chapters that doesn't show up at all in his older Battleship New Jersey book, you can see 3 pictures of drones being used on board Battleship New Jersey, including the first picture that I'm aware of our drone capture net, the so-called butterfly net, which would have been back here on the fantail, roughly where I'm standing today. So Paul went on board New Jersey around 1990 as she was starting the inactivation process, and he had already been on board. He'd already published his book on New Jersey, so he had a close relationship with their public affairs officers, and their PAO gave him a box of photographs that were taken on the ship, so they're open source, they're government photographs, and he has had them for this new edition of the book, and nobody else has seen these pictures. So here we finally have the very first proof of this, and Paul said he's going to donate those photographs that were given to him by the ship's PAO to the museum. So we're going to have those in our collection at some point in the near future. So we finally have evidence of the drones on board. So that brought us back here to the fantail today to look for any archaeological evidence we might have of where those drone recapture nets might have been mounted. And the nets, the pictures themselves don't show the ground. They're looking up at the drone being captured. So we can still see that it's a tripod system. There's one on each side, port and starboard. It's just aft of the flight deck near the 40mm gun tubs, where the flight decks are raised about 10 inches above the fantail here. So in that depressed area, and there's a central leg that's really big, and it's got a leg that goes forward, and it's got a leg that goes kind of forward and inboard, and a leg that goes kind of aft from here where we're standing. That said, this part of the ship has had a lot of work done. To install the tent, some original features were obliterated because of the tripping hazard of the aviation tie-down points. Many of them were plated over, and so we've potentially lost some of the evidence of where this thing was mounted, except for this plate I'm standing on back here. Now, the deck back here would have originally been about 2-inch thick teak. That teak has been ripped up because it was so rotten, and in that rip-up process, additional evidence might have been obliterated. But this plate would have at one time been level with the teak deck, so it doesn't really stand out much in photographs, but it's a steel plate, and it's got a bunch of bolt holes on it that have been cut off. Now, I'm not sure if these were studs that stood up that we cut flush to remove as a tripping hazard, or if they were bolts drilled down into the plate that had to be cut off to remove the thing that they were holding. Here's a picture of Battleship Missouri, the other West Coast battleship, which would have used the exact same drone detachment as we did, so probably had a fairly similar setup. And you can see that there should be a bracket mounted here on this plate, which is still extant on them. There's a strong chance that all of the drone control equipment from this ship was removed and cross-decked right over to Missouri along with our detachment. There's a chance that isn't the case and disappeared at some other point, but it seems more likely that there was only one set of this equipment for each the Atlantic Fleet and the Pacific Fleet, and it gets cross-decked. Shortly after the Iowa-class battleships successfully used these during the first Gulf War, they start to be used more widely, specifically by the Marines. So a lot of the amphibious carriers get drone detachments assigned to them, and so the number of drones in the fleet, the number of drone detachments, and all of that increases. So it's possible Missouri still has hers, because at that point it's not just 2 detachments and they're going from ship to ship to ship. There are now more detachments coming online. There's now more equipment for those detachments. So that is one possible theory that makes sense to me as to why we're largely missing ours, but you can still see it on some of the Iowa-class battleships. So we are really thankful for Paul for the research that he has been doing into Iowa-class battleships for literally 50 years. And in that time, he's released 2 books on New Jersey and a fantastic tome on Battleship Missouri. So lots of great information. Make sure you pick up this new copy that he's written. It is now the book on Battleship New Jersey. Are there any other features that show up on some of the Iowa-class battleships but not others that make you wonder, like we did, hey, did we even have a drone in the first place? Let us know in the comment section down below, and maybe we'll be able to look into it in the future. And maybe with Paul's help, we'll even find more pictures of it. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link down in the description for ways you can donate to support the museum. Also a link to those autographed copies of the book that we have. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.